Hi everyone, welcome back to THU TV. I'm Ian Fales and I'm joined by Kelly Port and Matthew Butler. How are you guys?
Good, thank you.
Good, thanks.
That's good. You guys are both visual effects supervisors at Digital Domain, and from what I heard last night, you pretty much started on the same day at Digital Domain, is that right?
Yeah, I'm surprised you remember anything from last night.
When was that?
August of '94.
Okay.
So this was, company started in '93, and so when we started, True Lies had just come out, and we both started kind of very low on the ladder there, about as low as you can get, basically.
We're still quite low. Actually.
Yeah.
But that pretty much makes you guys two of the longest serving employees, right, at Digital Domain?
Yeah, I think
that
Doug's
are still there. Yeah, Doug Roble,
Yeah.
Our head of software engineering, is like I think he's maybe 6 months or a year, a little bit longer than us. Yeah.
But spending so long at one company means you've really seen the progression of visual effects, especially digital and CG, really, I mean, being transported, right, over that 20-something year period.
Yeah, I would say it was more like being dragged through the bushes. But yeah, I mean, I think you see that if you move around other companies too, it's just a different viewpoint on it. But yeah, we've seen a lot of changes. I mean, when we started, well, you couldn't go to school for this, right? There was no, back in '94, it's not like you went to school for visual effects. They didn't have such things. So we ended up employing a whole bunch of eclectic people from all different backgrounds. I mean, Kelly and myself are good examples of that. And you just kind of went in there and, I don't know, we can do that. Let's figure it out.
Yeah. You had to learn it, or you had to invent it, I guess, as well, right?
Yeah, that's true, yeah.
I'm going to go back in time to those older projects, because I think sometimes they're really interesting to talk about the things that you had to invent. But just so people at home know what you've done recently, Matthew, your recent credits include Ready Player One, Ender's Game, and also a couple of Transformers films, among many others.
Mm-hmm.
Kelly, you recently were on Avengers Infinity War, Beauty and the Beast, and Maleficent, right? That's another one as well.
Yeah.
But let's go back a long time now, it's like 21 years, to Titanic. You were both on that film, right?
Yeah.
I wrote down, Kelly, that your credit for Titanic was digital paraphernalia supervisor.
Yes. These are the Wild West of credits, before any of these things were standardized. So Judith Crow, who was the digital effects supervisor at the time, she's like, what do you want your credit to be? And so I was heading up a very small team of, I think, 5 to 10 effects artists. We did things like smoke coming out of the stack, seagulls, bow wakes. So we shot a lot of miniatures, so the lifeboats needed rippling canvas, you know, as it was going through the wind. And any other thing, like when the ship broke in half, debris coming out of the ship. So it was sort of this paraphernalia. It was like kind of a catch-all phrase. So I came up with digital paraphernalia supervisor. And I think it's probably the only time that credit will ever exist in the history of film, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. And Matthew, yours was data integration supervisor.
Okay.
And what do you remember about what that involved?
Not much. I mean, it was a lot of stuff. I don't remember much, to be clear. I don't know. I was doing a bit of everything, and I think it was another conversation with Judith where that seemed to encompass all the different disciplines I did. What happened was I ended up being on set a lot of the time down in Rosarita with Jim. I think I'm not quite sure how it happened, but Rob Legato was the supervisor at the time. Needed to work back in DD, so he sent me, and so I would fly down there every week and be the person responsible for getting all the data. And this is back pre-digital, right? So I would go with tons of film in a lead case through customs each time, and capture all the information. And Doug Roble had written at the time this cool software that was able to use stereography. I know we use, ubiquitous now, right? But don't forget, back then it wasn't. It was like, yeah, I got this idea. If you film this thing from 2 different cameras, you can create the geometry of it, or other parts. In fact, I had to carry this giant teepee, and then add a camera rig, which was it was a physical mount of 2 Nikon cameras on a boom, which was probably about this big, and I would, like a lemon, I would stand up there and with a mechanical cable release, photograph these things. So I did stuff like that, and then also because my background is in computational fluid dynamics, and Jim had said, okay, I want to emulate the simulation. Can you emulate a simulation? I think we just did of the Titanic going to the bottom of the ocean.
Right.
So you're the guy for that. So I also supervised that. It was just easy to just say data integration supervisor.
Yeah, because that was a shot, wasn't it? Like an all CG shot of the propellers starting up.
Well, that's different.
That's different.
Yeah.
Oh.
So what I was talking about was literally a simulation, which is more like graphics, and that's what they showed. Gosh, I'm trying to remember.
Literally, the part of the movie when he's describing what's happening to, and he's showing the graphic of
almost
This is to Rose, actually, isn't it?
Huh?
Isn't it to Rose? Isn't she on board at this point?
Yeah, he's explaining.
That guy is describing
Bill Paxton,
how the ship went up, and then the way
he's got his big ass right in the water.
That's
sticking
right.
out.
That's right.
That sequence. Yeah.
But what you were talking about, which is probably what you and I were talking about last night, I think.
Yeah.
Sort of remember, was TD30, which was the underwater shot, which was, I think it might have been our first ever all CG shot. It was 100% synthetic, and I don't think we'd done anything like that before, but this was a shot underneath, seeing the Titanic go over us, and tilting up on it, and seeing the cavitation, pulling the air out of solution over the props. So yeah, I worked on that too.
Yeah. It's interesting, last night what we were also talking about is, and as digital paraphernalia supervisor, you mentioned, yes, you're doing digital things, but also there were elements, right, that you were pulling from, maybe shooting water elements or miniatures. And we've really, haven't we, in 20 years, we've really have moved on to the fact that CG elements are photoreal and just as good, if not better, and more flexible than, real elements.
Well, we still certainly shoot elements every chance we get. Even on Infinity War, we shot a ton of elements, sparks, and elements that you don't think of necessarily traditionally as elements. For example, wigs on a prop, on a maquette head.
Right.
For for Gamora, for baby Gamora, things like that, where the blue screen or the green screen isn't all that perfect, there's stuff behind it, so a lot of times, or they're walking in front of a set or other characters where there is no blue screen. So things like that help the fine detail of hair, where you can kind of track in a little patch of hair without having to do a full hair groom and hair simulation, which is very costly. It's amortized if you do that as a big digital character, but you don't want to do that just for a couple shots here and there. So plants and physical elements like snow and rain are still helpful.
Okay.
But yeah, I think big pyrotechnics and water simulations, those are very feasible now, and so they scale to the correct scale. So it's actually really nice and actually computationally possible, where it wasn't back then.
Yeah.
At
Right.
all.
I remember us talking about this last night, right? So, because I remember saying, back in the day, I would be completely nervous and I'd be worried about trying to pull that off. A lot of what we do back then, at least, was like, well, how the fuck are we going to do this, right?
Yeah.
And so if you can rely on something that's real, you've got a leg up. And you think, I'm not going to try and achieve that fully synthetically. But nowadays, what you said is true, is that the simulation tools now, the copying natural phenomenon is in the vocabulary of the software, and you really can do amazing things. And I think I have 100% confidence now that you can do that synthetically. I wouldn't worry at all about saying, you got to do that completely synthetic. Now, obviously, if you've got a camera and you've got something and it's nearby and you can get it, I'm with Kelly. You'd always do that. But I think we've crossed that boundary now. It's like, you know what? Yeah, we can actually and we being the collective group, not two of us, but like, you know, visual effects can achieve those things quite realistic nowadays.
Yeah. I feel like digital domain, and we're talking about elements, but also sort of advancements in visual effects, digital domain, partly because of its longevity, has been at the forefront of getting a lot of those digital effects elements so real. I mean, really, DD had adopted Houdini quite early in the scheme of things. Matt, were you involved in What Dreams May Come and doing something with L systems and the tree and that sort of thing?
Kind of. I was on What Dreams May Come. Yep. Yeah. I think I did supervise something on that. I'm not quite sure what it was. But I remember David Prescott did the tree. He did the L Systems tree.
Yeah.
I think I did all the leaves for the tree at the time. Right. Yeah. It's a long time ago now.
Yeah.
But that was all in Prisms. Yeah. But yes, so definitely digital domain adopted open architecture software that you could get in there. Again, we were kind of like the Rand Corporation, right? It's a bunch of people just brainstorming. Therefore, you needed software that you could get in there and tinker. It wasn't really an option to have off-the-shelf things that will just do anything you wanted. It's like, well, how do you do that? You needed something where you could get in there and design the specific thing you required. And so I think side effect software is a good example of that, right? You know, Prisms allowed us to get in there, and obviously Houdini's better. I mean, I don't even know if I can spell Houdini but myself. So it's not like I touch it anymore. But yeah, that's a good example of tool sets where they afford you the ability to brainstorm and do things that haven't been done before, as opposed to saying press F7, you're going to get that out of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's not just the tools, is it, Kelly? It's actually being able to be on set and problem solve. That's a big part of also having that longevity in visual effects, and to know what you might have done before and come up with a solution like that.
Yeah, I mean, supervision on set, a lot of people think, you know, people who aren't familiar with the industry anyway, that any visual effects happens, you know, post-production, or in fact that on a big show where we have a heavy involvement, there's very much a presence in pre-production, in the planning of shots and visualizing technically how we accomplish a complex shot, how to do it, working with all the department heads and how we, you know, are able to do that and the best way to do that. You know, what kinds of screens to hang and where they should be, you know, what kinds of elements to shoot. Even going as far as, you know, for example, on Beauty and the Beast is deciding, you know, doing tests up front and making, like, should we have this character in a suit? How should we approach this? Should we have costumes made?
Yeah.
And I think Matthew would agree that just having practical, whether it's costumes or materials, anything that can be put on set that can be lit, and it's incredibly important to have that reference, so that we can, even if it's an all-digital thing that we put in later, we know what it looks like in that context and that lighting against those characters, and we can just replace it.
It's sort of, I think some people might be surprised to hear that if they're not in visual effects, because there's often a feeling these days that everything is just CG. But really, visual effects supervisors and artists want as much in there practically for reference, right?
Yeah, even if you replace it, for sure, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think the Fast and Furious franchise is a huge example of that, where I know in the last one, a huge amount of work was done, I think in Iceland, right? Was it Iceland?
Yeah.
Where, you know, they went there and scouted it, and there was some snow, but then they went there and there wasn't any snow, but they had all these stunt cars and sets all put together, and huge explosions. But at the end of the day, they had so many cameras. I think they had, I don't know how many, 60 cameras or something like that. Wow. You know, mounted on cars and all sorts of different formats. So tons of that stuff had to be cleaned up and replaced, and environments extended, and faces of stunt drivers replaced with the actors. Snow, and of course they didn't have a submarine crashing through the ice. And
they didn't? Yeah. No, exactly.
So a lot goes into what you seemingly, you know, obviously the submarine, but in a typical kind of huge car chase like that, just how much goes into that without really even thinking that there's a whole lot going on there, but there is.
I'm curious whether, seeing as you've been at DD for so long, whether you miss miniatures. Miniatures were such a big part of DD's early history, and you know, Apollo 13 and Titanic obviously, and others. Is there any part of you that's a bit sort of, you know,
nostalgic about it?
Yeah, nostalgic about it.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
What are your memories of any miniature interaction that you had early on?
Oh.
You know what was great was going into dailies afterwards, because typically, well, often when it's a miniature, you're often doing some destruction with a miniature. That's
right.
Often the reason to have a miniature. And you get maybe 2 goes at it, maybe 3 if you can redress, right? So, whereas the curse of what we do is you can keep messing with it now forever, right?
Yeah.
So, well, when is it done? One of the beautiful things about exploding miniatures is, okay, let's go look at that in the morning and hopefully it's okay. And it's probably overcranked, and this is pre-digital too, so you didn't actually get to view it. You had to actually wake up in the morning, you had to see, you know, the film developed and go into the screening room and go, you know, or yeah, that looks effing awesome, you know.
Yeah.
So that was pretty cool.
That was super cool. And I just remember I think I wouldn't say the heyday, but almost like a heyday of early digital domain was when we were simultaneously working on Titanic, Fifth Element, Dante's Peak, and Apollo 13.
Maybe Apollo had been done by then, but
Apollo,
but there was another one. There was
anyway, it was not necessarily, but they're all kind of like right around the same time.
Yeah.
And we had this, you know, Saturn V rocket. Because we had huge stages right then where we do all the motion control.
Yeah.
And so I know Apollo was on our stages. Yeah, that was done before. And then that eventually got, so just to see these, and they were not miniatures, they were actually quite huge, actually. Yeah. And just to see those you know, rocket, at least pieces of the rocket and the landing capsule and things like that. And then the Fifth Element buildings, you know, where we did go down the sort of an avenue, a boulevard, like a flying car. Those things were like easily 20 feet high, those buildings.
Yeah, the Titanic, one of the Titanic miniatures was 40,
the hero one was,
model, right?
40 foot, yeah.
And then
all laser cut floorboards and everything. Yeah.
And then when we did the breaking, well, we shot out in Acton, that was a quarter scale. There were many different scale versions of the Titanic. It wasn't like, people often come to a company and go, oh, where's the model? You know, it's like, well, there's quite a few of those, really, including the almost full-scale one down in Resurrito, of course.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I've been to Digital Domain, and in your old Venice Beach location, they were sort of around. I'm not sure if these miniatures are still hanging up anywhere in the new location.
Yeah, we have a few.
Yeah, we have a few.
Yeah, we have the Apollo capsule. I think we have a little, the McDonald's truck from Fifth Element.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I brought Chihuahua back, who was a terracotta warrior in China.
Yeah.
At the end of the movie, they had all these terracotta warriors that they built for the filming. And they said, well, if you want one, you can pay a couple $100 or whatever. So we have, I named him Chihuahua.
This is from the Mummy 3, right?
Yeah,
right. Yeah. Oh,
we're in the
cool.
Gobi Desert shooting that,
Yeah. I'm hoping you guys will just let me in one day and not tell anyone that I'm there, and I might just
come on by.
Walk out with the McDonald's truck.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Let's talk a bit about your most recent projects. Matthew, Ready Player One, basically DD did the real world visual effects. And some of the stuff for the stacks was some of the coolest stuff that I've seen recently. What did they actually film for that? And you know, what sort of extensions were you doing?
For the stacks itself?
Yeah.
Well, we filmed that in Leavesden, England.
Yeah.
And they built, I think, about 6 semi-stacks. So they're not the full height, but enough to be able to shoot a bunch of shots in camera. And absolutely brilliant work that they built there in Leavesden. But obviously, when you stick a big wide camera and you want to see a scope shot, that doesn't go very far, right? So we actually ended up pretty much replacing everything. Again, back to the referencing, superb. It was perfect.
Yes.
It gave Stephen and his editors things to play with editorially, time change, whatever. But in the end, it was completely synthetic. And I mean, we did, as you said, we did all the real world content. ILM did the Oasis content, which is the virtual world. But we also did all the motion capture and the pre-visualization.
That's right.
And my favorite actually was the hologram. You might not think that's a real world thing, but it was. It was in Sorrento's office in the real world. But he summons Parzival as a hologram into his world.
Yeah.
That was the most fun part of the whole thing for me.
And in fact, that whole virtual production stuff was sort of, you have a big stage at DD, but that was sort of actually transplanted to the UK, right?
Yeah. So we had Stephen come in, and he decided, yes, okay, Digital Domain's going to do the motion capture because we, as you said, have a nice big stage with the right lighting for him, all the things he liked. And it's like, all right, well, we're going to shoot in England, so pack that up and build that over here. So that's the first thing that group did, was to go over there and assemble actually 2 or 3 of these sets. Yeah.
Wow. And then Kelly, obviously one of the big projects as well this year is Thanos from Infinity War. I'm really, one thing that got talked about a lot with that was a bit of deep learning, AI. Can you talk a bit more about that at the early stages and how that even came into DD's pipeline?
Well, yeah, machine learning is definitely used for an aspect of Thanos in the early stage. So we have the regular helmet-mounted cameras with the tracking dots applied to, in this case, Josh Brolin's face. I think there's like 150 dots. From that facial track, which is a traditional facial track, we derive a very low resolution mesh of the face, with each vertex basically being one of those dots, so 150, so very low resolution. And then prior to even the shoot, we do a session with Brolin where we do using Medusa, which is based on Disney Zurich's research lab. Get a series of high-resolution face shapes from him, doing sample dialogue, things like that. So we have a data set of high-resolution data of how his face moves. And so it takes this low-resolution mesh, and it finds sort of the best fit of what could be, a high-resolution version of that, basically. And it does a pretty good solve, but then when we find sort of a discrepancy and we need to make a tweak, we feed that back into a learning system, and it will continue to improve that solution as we feed it more data.
Yeah.
So machine learning is very data dependent, and so it's what you use to train it, and so the more data used to train it, the more it effectively comes out with a more correct solution. Yeah.
I feel like that, and of course there's a lot more artistry in the facial animation than just the whole animation, of course, but sort of that facial animation development at DD and virtual production is an example of how 20 plus years of technology and artistry has culminated in this great work. What we were talking about last night, though, is that just because of all these tools, it doesn't mean that these big shows are any easier. No. That's true.
Well, no, because the bar keeps going up, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, the audience is very discerning, and the expectation is higher, and the amount of money available is less. So, it doesn't get any easier now.
No.
Definitely not.
Not that I'm asking for any difficult stories, but, I mean, is part of the problem just also you've got a really big team that you've got to shepherd through to these final shots?
I think we've all seen the credit rolls at the end of these films. I know, speaking for Avengers, I think it had, I'm going to be wrong exact count of the shot count, but it's, I think, around 2,800 shots, and I think there was only a handful of shots, like 50 or 80 or something like that, that didn't have any visual effects in them at all. Yeah. And 13 visual effects studios working on it, 7 major big ones. Our team alone had 300 people, so it's an enormous effort, over quite a long period of time too.
And I doubt Ready Player One, there's probably very few non-visual effect shots in that as well, ultimately.
Well, obviously, for ILM, all the synthetic world is 100%.
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure what proportion of the real world was visual effects, but we had a large number, yes. So leave it at that.
All right. Well, guys, it's been great talking to you. Thanks for coming in. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you guys later. We'll be more THU TV during the week. See you later.